Attention all units, please stand by to copy a BOLO. BOLO from Anytown PD regarding a delayed homicide. The incident occurred at 123 Any Street, Anytown, USA. No suspect or vehicle description provided. All units are requested to respond to helpsolvethecase.com for briefing. Clear BOLO 0818 hours. Well, hi, this is Christine Burke here with Help Solve the Case. And today we are here with Rashod Coleman and very excited to have him here for a number of reasons. One, because he is a police officer like myself, so we have a lot of in common about that. Well, excited for one thing, because we're going to talk about his case that he is working. And he's asked for some help from Help Solve the Case, and excited because of what it is. As we do Help Solve the Case, we kind of have three areas of interest. We have our unsolved cold cases, we have our wrongful conviction, and then we have our DNA stuff, which I call our DNA drama. And today we're going to talk about wrongful conviction, which I think is so interesting, and we're glad to be able to help. So welcome, Rashod. How are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, we were talking a little bit before going on the air, and like I said, if I could do every case, I absolutely would. But happy to help. And so I know a little bit about the case. We've talked a little bit through email or whatever. I just think it's so interesting. I don't even know where to start first, because I'm going to go there. We talk about wrongful conviction, and then you have police officer in the same sentence, and usually those don't go together. It's like, okay, yeah. How do you and to have, here we are, two cops, right? And we're talking about working on a wrongful conviction, like, 1 and 1 doesn't equal 3. But I guess tell me, we want to get to the story of the case, but I don't know where to start, because I want to hear about, how obviously it's your father, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to help on it, but how does it all go together? Because like I said, it kind of doesn't make sense. But what do you want? You want the person that knows investigations and knows about this stuff to be working on it. So I'll shut up and I'll let you start talking.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, because I'm an officer of the courts, and because I'm just an honest person overall. Whoever had the wrongdoings on the night that we will speak of should be arrested and should be charged and should serve time, and justice should be served, regardless if that's a family member of mine or not a family member of mine. This case, I feel like it might not be, but I wasn't there. So, and similar to yourself, sometimes good people do bad things. So a lot of times, in this case in particular, when I would talk to someone about the case, they would automatically assume that I'm saying, my father could never do something like this, or somebody I love can never do something like this. When, as I know, you'll talk to someone during an investigation and they'll give you all the signs that they're a great person and they didn't do it. And then it'll turn out at the end, they did it, Mm-hmm. So as far as my father's case goes, 1987, February 21st, on his way to work, he was stopped by a police officer. And the police officer questioned him about a crime that happened in the area where he was around that location. About an hour earlier, there was a young female, 22-year-old female in Newark, Delaware, that was getting money out of an ATM. A gentleman came up behind her and grabbed her, forced her into a side alleyway, then changed his mind and took her into her vehicle. And they drove off. While they were driving off, he took the money, which was $8 U.S. currency from the woman, sexually assaulted the woman by grabbing her hand and putting it on her genitalia, drove around a corner. Eventually, she sees people standing outside. So she takes the car, hops up on a corner, starts screaming. The guy jumps out, walks away. Police are called to the scene. Once they get to the scene, they interview the woman about the description, which was a black male, I believe he was almost 6 foot, maybe a little taller than 6 foot. Wearing a brown coat. At the same time, the police got another call for burglary in a senior citizen's home. They go and respond. An officer went and responded to that particular location. And when he got to that location, he found a 79-year-old woman that had been raped and brutally assaulted. Face fractured, swollen eyeball from being hit by the man's fist. She said she woke up in the middle of the night. Horrifying scene is described in the paperwork, to a guy beating on her. He then rapes her, then washes himself off and walks out of the house. At that time, police are called. A perimeter is set, which is the time my father was stopped. The first woman who was at the ATM was brought to the scene. She said it wasn't my father because, one, he didn't have a coat on, and two, his facial hair was different from the male, meaning that he had more facial hair than the male that had kidnapped her moments earlier. They let him go, took the female back to the station, interviewed her. Around 9 a.m., when the bank opened, they got the tape from the bank, which had a male that they claim was grabbing the female and had a picture of him. And they say the picture was that of my father, Daniel Coleman. Went and arrested him. Back in the interrogation room, the police alleged that he admitted to the crime. He denied it, went to court, took it to trial, lost trial, 2 life sentences. And that was the case. So I eventually, I didn't know much about the case. My mother eventually explained the case to me.
How old were you? I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think this is so interesting because, well, again, from several reasons, as you're talking about this and what you just said, I'm thinking about, I think as police officers, we don't realize the effect of, somebody being removed from the household, right? So how old were you when your dad was arrested?
I was 3 years old. My 2 older brothers, one was 6 and one was 7, I believe.
And when did your mom tell you, like at what age is that appropriate? Or how did that even go down? I mean, we think about trying to talk to kids about the birds and the bees. How do you even have that conversation with your child?
Yeah. Good question. So when I was in the 8th grade, I never knew why he was locked up, but my mother would take me every now and then to go see him. And I just, thought I was just going into some funny place with loud noises and high fences and barbed wires. And, this guy was,
right?
I'm sorry?
It was the way it was?
It was just the way it was because I was so young.
Okay.
And in the 8th grade, I started talking to a girl who was white. And we began to have a relationship, and me and my mother used to talk all the time. So I went back and I talked to her about it, and I'm smiling. And she sat me down and she said, your father is doing 2 life sentences right now because a white woman essentially went on a stand and lied about him. So I don't want you dating a white woman, a white girl. And that's how I found out that my father had been arrested for doing something to a white woman. Years later, before I got married, I wanted my wife, my now wife, to meet my father when I was engaged. So I was set an appointment and we went to see him inside the prison. And it was my first time speaking to him as an adult. And I was struck by how hospitable he was with the situation. I knew his circumstance. I had read about his case online a little bit, and I didn't know how he would react to me bringing a white woman inside of the jail. But he was hospitable. He was telling me, look, if you're in love, it'll all work out. Don't worry about me. It is what it is. I've got the time. It doesn't look like I'm going anywhere anytime soon. I just want you to be happy. And I just want you, your future wife to be happy. And it was remarkable to both of us as we drove off, and we're saying, man, this just doesn't seem like a guy that would commit a crime like that. And
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to interrupt this story, but I have to add, because again, you keep bringing up things that I just don't think that the public thinks about. I currently work with people that are incarcerated and on defense, and it's interesting because I think not having that experience, or someone that's been convicted or wrongfully convicted or whatever, the juxtaposition about the bad guy, right? The bad guy or the bad girl, what they're like, but they are real people. Yeah. And I don't even know if it's fortitude or what, the grace. I don't know, to to go through all this and feel that hope and justness will prevail, and justice too.
Right.
That's just amazing. And now, were you a police officer at the time you went to see him?
No, I wasn't a police officer at the time. Me and my wife, we were both teachers. And I had always had a dream to be in law enforcement for some odd reason, even though I didn't have a great relationship with law enforcement. But about a year or two after that, I was headed into the police academy. And at the same time, ironically, he was getting out of jail. His appeal had went through, and he was going to be released. He was going to have a lifetime of probation and parole, but he was being released the same year that I was going into the police academy.
Okay.
And when he got out, we sat down and I asked him if he wanted me to look into the case. And at first it was the look of defeat. He was just like, man, look, I know what the system can do to a person. I've lived through it. I've missed my kids growing up. I just want to sit back and enjoy my life before I die. I want to enjoy my grandkids, enjoy my wife before I die. I don't even want to do anything with the justice system anymore. Because I'm learning things, right? I'm in the academy. I'm learning all these different terms. And I'm telling him, this will be a good case study for me. He's saying, no, leave it alone. Live your life, man. Do the right thing. And it wasn't until a year and a half later that he was put on ankle monitoring system. And they told him that he would be on it for the rest of his life. That he said, look, I need to look into it now because I'm being victimized again for a crime that I didn't commit. So how about we sit down and look at this case?
Wow. I just think that I don't even know, like, I feel bad asking this question, but did you, before you decided to become a police officer, did you, well, maybe you don't even want to answer it. Like, did you think he was guilty, or did you even pay any attention to it? Or like that was the reality of how you interacted with your father, and then that was done. And then you're going to start a relationship, which I will say, tell us about your book too, because I just started reading that. Right. So we don't want to give that away, but this is part of the stuff that you talk about, because there's so much going on there. I would want to say as a person, like just as a son, how you look at your father, and then, like you said, to have this desire to be a police officer, did that change your perspective in any way, or how, that's got to be mentally challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was very mentally challenging. To be honest, when I first read this story about the ATM and him, kidnapping someone and taking money from him, I just thought it was, maybe he's done it, but it wasn't as it was written. So the rape case was never a part of it, a part of his sentencing, or he was never charged with it. But I just thought, you were out one night, out at a bar, you get into it with some female, one thing leads to another, and here you are in this situation. And another thing I always tell people is, in the inner city, so many fathers are absent that it's no different from the next person. So because my father's not in the house, my friend's father's not in the house, and he's locked up off, for selling drugs.
It was normal.
And so, yeah, so it's like, okay, that just is what it is. One day he'll get out and he might go back. And so I struggled with that a little bit. But after that time, after I took my wife to see him, was the first time as a mature adult I spoke with him, and it just something didn't sit right with me, with him being this monstrous person that the paper was speaking of. So at that point, we corralled and I spoke with him, and after he asked me to take on a case, and I looked him in the eye, we went out, we had a couple beers, that's always the truth serum, right? And it was my first time having a drink with my father, and I said, look, I'll look at this case for you, but I want you to know that I'm sticking my neck out on the line. And if there's anything about this case that I don't know, I want you to just tell me now. That's not to say I won't help you, but I can't get myself jammed up in something and you're not being truthful to me. Because, one thing police officers always know is if you're lying about one thing, you're probably lying about something else too. So, he said, no, he said, this is it. He said, I never saw the woman before in my life. First time I saw her was when they brought her to me and shined the light on me. And then I saw her in court, and that was it. And I started looking at the case. And a couple of things started setting me back. When I saw, I don't know how deep you want to go into the case. When I saw that he was attempting to have the confession that they said he made thrown out, I thought that, okay, so you did confess to it. And it wasn't until he explained to me, he's no trained lawyer. His education, he's got a GED from high school. So his terminology, he wouldn't understand, lawyer talk or courtroom talk. But some of the things that he was saying about the interrogation were making sense from a person that just doesn't know what's going on, and that was, that's kind of where I took it. So we began looking at it, and I said, man, these things just are not adding up in this case.
Well, one of the things I want to talk about, your gut, right? So as a cop, and I always use it in my police life. In my personal life, didn't pay attention to it so much. I always tell people, like, there's a reason you got to listen to it in all aspects, right? Because it saved me a lot as a police officer. So when you get that feeling, right, right, you trust it. You don't know exactly what is what, but yeah, I got to think that's a very, that's a hard question. To have that conversation, like you said, because that's something that I had asked you, like, did you have that conversation? Because man, that could go so many bad ways that, here you're trying to establish this relationship with your dad, and then you want the answer, right? Because you have a reputation as a police officer. Everything has to be truthful and on the up and up and all this stuff. And I could just imagine it would be awkward because he wants to say the right thing that's going to keep you around or keep your love or whatever, or maybe redeem himself or whatever. And you hope that's the truth, right? And then you want the answer from him at the same time, but you want the good answer that it is a wrongful conviction. Unfortunately, you don't want the bad answer that, yes, I did it, right? So it's all these feelings and things, but then to listen to it and say that stuff isn't done right. And that's some of the stuff with the wrongful conviction and all the stuff and documentation and back in the day, especially with things not being recorded. People watch TV and they think it's just so simple, right?
Yeah.
To solve the case, and we're going to have this, we're going to have that. And one of the things, and we've only talked about it briefly, we're going to get into it more as we work the case, but what you mentioned, you were just describing it about the witness identifying and saying it's not him. Okay, so she was there. She was there and said no, and that brings up a lot of people back in the day. They relied on when DNA and fingerprinting and all that stuff wasn't prevalent, they relied on eyewitness identification. But as you do the stories and the research and stuff, I bring in experts in my cases, because eyewitness identification based on what goes on can even be faulty, right? So that's very interesting. And I'll bring up, we were talking before we came on air about one of my cases, and it was interesting through the use of body cameras, right? That the police use body cameras now. And it's interesting to see their version. I don't want to say like a version, because I believe they're being truthful as the way they interpreted it, right? Through their eyes and their emotions and whatever. But what the body cam shows versus what their perception was. And then to have this eyewitness testimony to just convict somebody, it's so scary. And then I think we talked a little bit about, you've looked at some other evidence, including some fingerprints and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the first thing was sure she with the show up, they brought her around. She looked at him and said, it's not him. And you go back and you read, and as a police officer, a lot of times, even in, just for a quick example, even in the academy, we would have a drill where we would be sitting in class.
Yeah,
just doing
I know where you're going.
Doing a random thing, and then on a projector, it would be a person that would just be pointing a gun at you. Yeah. And they would ask each cadet, what color was the guy? You would have black, Hispanic, white. What shirt was he wearing? Red, green, yellow, and it was everywhere. And it was because it was a shock to you. So you see what you thought you saw, and then they would bring the picture back up, and everybody say, "Oh man, you thought this and you thought that," but those things really happen. Yes. On the street, and they're so real. So that was the first thing, and the second thing was when she jumped out of the vehicle, there were 3 witnesses there. And I asked my father, well, what did the witnesses say when they came to court? And he said, there were no witnesses at court. And I said, what do you mean? If there are witnesses there, how are there are no witnesses at court? And he said, I don't know. My lawyer never called the witnesses for some reason. And not only were there witnesses at the place where she jumped out of the vehicle, but when the guy originally took her from the ATM into the alleyway, when they came back out of the alley, there were three witnesses there that remember seeing them 2 together, and specifically remember seeing the suspect. One of the guys said it was Daniel Coleman. The 5 other witnesses said that was not Daniel Coleman, was not the guy that kidnapped, the woman that night. And my mother was a little upset about things, and that the police said that they were going to stop any African American that night. And she's asking me, wasn't that illegal? They can't just stop any African American. I said, well, you know this. Well, it depends. If the call is for an African American of a certain height wearing certain clothing in that area, then yeah, we can stop African Americans. The same way if it was a white guy that committed the crime and wearing certain clothes in a certain area at a certain time of the day, if those things line up, then that race kind of ties into the stop. And I thought, one of the reasons why right now I'm able to figure out all this information is because that initial officer, I feel like, did do a good job of preserving evidence, one of which was fingerprints that he not only took from the rape victim's window that the suspect came in, but also out of the vehicle that my father allegedly was in. He collected 8 fingerprints and a palm print from the vehicle. Not only that, and he sent the evidence to the FBI, which was another thing. I'm like, whoa, there's FBI evidence right here. Call my father back again. Hey, did you have FBI evidence saying that you were at the crime? Because if you did, there would be no way you would be out of jail right now. And he said, no, I've never heard of any fingerprints at all. And I'm sitting here reading it on the police report from 1987. And I'm saying to myself, how is it possible a lawyer didn't bring this up in court, that there are fingerprints? I didn't know the answer at that point. But after an FOIA request, I figured out that his fingerprints were nowhere inside of the vehicle. So
wow. Yeah. And there's a couple of things I want to talk about that you bring up, because in doing these cold cases, me being on the outside, and even some people that have been, and maybe you can talk to this on the inside or whatever you want to call it, right? Being a police officer, it's very hard to get information. And thank goodness, I know where that helps me be successful, is I know where the information is, right? Because I've worked in all those little nooks and crannies in the department, right? And so you almost sometimes have to be very assertive and push for it to get it. And the people, when I talk to the parents and stuff, they're like, well, how do you know this? And how did this? And they're just completely clueless, especially like you're talking about your dad going into some interrogation and whatever, and just maybe not even having the educational skills to do it. Exactly. But let alone to know what's coming at him, right? That it's not an interview. We're not just going to chat. It's an interrogation, which is a completely different animal, right? And just talking about this stuff, getting the information and getting the police to report, because it's so hard to try to recreate these things, because you're so hampered with trying to figure out. I used to always, people hated because I wrote big detailed reports, right? Records was like, oh my goodness, because back in the day I was handwriting them. And they hated it because I would write. But I was taught that, and I like the movies, right? That you should be able to pick it up and go to the scene or go whatever, or even in your mind, picture everything that happened and the way it was. And if you don't have that, it can lead to, forget about just regular miscommunication, right? And now you're looking at it and it's like, what has happened, right? Where's this? Yeah. Where is that? What happened to this? And that was the remarkable part about it, which I was telling my family, is the fact that we are able to get information on this case from 1987 and 2020, 2021 is remarkable, because a lot of times police will say no,
You're not getting it. No, I have this. No, you can't get it. Fill out whatever form you want. The answer is no. And
Right.
what recourse do you have? Do you have $20,000? You have $30,000 to go hire this big time lawyer that can kick in the door and say, I want these documents and I want these documents right now. And that's why I thank you and your group for hearing out this case. Because the only reason why I found out about the FOI 8 request is at a training that I was at. A guy, he's sitting up there and he's saying, hey, listen, when it comes to sexual assault cases and they're sent to the FBI, just understand that people can get the information, get the results through a Freedom of Information Act request. And I'm in the midst of dealing with my father's thing, and I'm saying, whoa, what's that? Let me look into that. Sure enough, I send it off. A couple months later, they send it back saying that my father's fingerprints were not in the rape suspect's house or inside of the vehicle, and that there was DNA found in the vehicle. There were his shoes were taken and the carpet out of the vehicle were taken, none of which matched anything that was on him. So, it's amazing.
And so it was tested, right? Because a lot of times, I mean, and this is kind of scary, you know, I could be opening up a can of worms, but even cases that I'm working on now that the prosecution doesn't even test anything. They're like, well, we're not going to test that. We're going to wait until it goes down the road. And if it goes to trial and whatever. And I'm always with, you know, my guys, I'm like, hey, like, if you didn't do it, we need to do this, right? But
we need to test this right now.
Like, I'll leave this up to you, but we really need to test this because how, I mean, and I guess that's just, you know, I would assume, right? And this is, you know, assuming that the prosecution, if I was a prosecutor, I would never want to put on a case that I didn't feel was 100% correct about. And one of the things too, like going back and looking at all these cases, I really want to have an unbiased opinion, and sometimes some of my families can get a little frustrated with me because I don't accept anything as fact. I said, we're going to find the facts. We're going to look here. You know, if there's 10 things, we're going to look at every 10 thing. We're not going to just assume that it is what you think it is or what you should be or whatever. We're going to rule out everything, and then whatever we're left with, then we decide what we're going to do with, right? And so it sounds like you're saying that fingerprints didn't match, the DNA didn't match. So here's a question. I mean, it's something we can get into. Did you talk to the lawyer that handled this case, or is he long?
Yeah, I have not, but she's retired now. She's been retired for about 4 years, I believe. And I haven't been able to find her yet.
Okay.
So yeah, I did a little bit of digging. Yeah, I was going to say that, but I said I'm not going to just put them to work, you know. So yeah, I have not been able to find her, and I haven't been able to confirm where the actual fingerprints are, which are like two big things. You know, I haven't been able to confirm if the FBI still has the fingerprints. Did they send just the results back? Did they send the fingerprints and the results back? But I do know, one thing I do know is that the police department had the results of the fingerprints before the trial, which is huge.
So that means, I mean, we're thinking that the fingerprints said, in our estimation, right? I'm looking at you like, you know, you guys are hearing this, but we're face to face over Zoom. I'm looking at you like, I'm assuming like, well, if the fingerprints didn't match, like me as a cop, when I'm working my case, I'm going to be like, maybe I might want to look at this a little further, right? But
yeah, exactly.
Do you think they just went with the eyewitness, or what is your, I mean, I think you said you had the trial transcript. Do you have the trial transcript?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
yep.
So
I had all the trial transcripts.
So we can get into that. And what's your feeling about the way, and this is kind of scary too for other people, again, being involved in the defense of these cases, and no shade on the attorneys, but you kind of have to pick a theory or pick a way and go with it. It's not like you have the opportunity to kind of lay everything out and say, okay, well, we're going to try this, you know, like they say, throw the spaghetti against the wall, see if it sticks. No, you kind of have to pick a lane and go in it. And if you haven't, like, let's just say they decided to just use the eyewitness and not the fingerprints for whatever reason, and then you leave all of that stuff on the table. And if that doesn't work, then what do you do? Like, what do you think they just did the eyewitness testimony, or?
Yeah, that's the only thing that they did when it came to evidence was one, they had the alleged confession, which he went and took the stand also, which you know, you know how the defense attorneys never say put your client on the stand, but he took the stand. I thought he did a remarkable job to go against, you know, one of the best prosecutors here. And he said, I never admitted to anything inside an interrogation room, that they confused me. And my question to him, well, how did they confuse you? What do you mean? Did you say you kidnapped her and you did, and you just knew her? What do you mean that they you know, they confused you? And his thing was, they would ask me a question like, you know, when's the last time you were with your girlfriend? Because he had a girlfriend at the time, and he would say, you know, yesterday or this morning. And they would ask him, well, have you touched her sexually? You know, and he said, yeah, you know, I touched her when I was leaving out. I might have patted her on the butt or something like that when I was leaving out for work. And they would say, oh, so you did kidnap her? And he's saying, well, who are we talking about? Are we talking about my girlfriend? Are we talking about this woman, this victim that's saying that you think I kidnapped? And they would ask him, well, what do you think we're talking about? And he would say, my girlfriend. And they would say, you know, then it became like a back and forth of, you know, what he's talking about. And so, you know, that part had me in the middle, right? Because I can't see how why would that would take three people in a room to all come up with a lie, right? Which is kind of unusual when it comes to police. You know, that's kind of hard to believe. But then I look at the other aspect of it is the victim was in that same room an hour early, and she was videotaped and made a written statement. My father was in there an hour later, same room. The officers say that they had a videotape inside of the room, yet nothing was taped at all. And I thought that was interesting. And I'm saying, well, why wouldn't you just tape them? There's a nail in the hole. Go ahead and tape them. And, you know, that didn't happen. So I thought that was a little interesting.
This was, what did you say, 87, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to date myself, but, you know, I did interviews around those times, and I mean, it was a little bit bulky, but I had a tape recorder. I mean, we all didn't have cell phones like we do now. You know, it's amazing when, you know, and obviously you don't want to use your personal stuff, whatever, but most of the officers have cell phones. They've got body camera. They've got all this stuff, and there's no documentation, and you don't want to think, like you said, bad things, but how do you have it? I mean, I even have it today in some of my cases. Some is recorded and some isn't. And if you have nothing to hide, why would you? I mean, I don't even like saying that, right? But yeah. Why would you not? Because that's only more evidence. I just, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting because when that happens, doubt comes in. So now I don't know if I understand. I don't know if I believe you like I did a second ago. When something like that comes up, you know, and then the officers allege that my father was on tape, you know, that they had a still picture, and this is 1987, of course, and that he was on tape, and that there was a picture of him. And I asked my father, was that, you know, who the picture looked like? And he said, I don't know. There was the picture wasn't me, and so I've tried to get that picture because I'm figuring, okay, I can go get that picture, have that picture enhanced, and we can see if it's him or not. And denied, you know, I'm denied that picture also. It's a part of an investigation. You can't have the picture.
We'll see. And that's something, again, we can talk about it, we can work on it, and we can argue, because once again, it's very disturbing, because I so value law enforcement, right? I was in it. I take pride in my profession, and like we talked about, God knows there's so much garbage going around, but when you and I don't know what else to say, when people hide behind the ongoing case and the this and the that, you're as far as I'm concerned, you know, and you talked about the fact that the materials were available and that you got them, and I think that's good, because if somebody was convicted and he's going through all this and parole or probation or any of this stuff, you have to have the resources so they preserve it. I mean, what we're seeing more and more is that they're getting rid of them in a couple of years, which is disgusting, not only from a background check perspective, but trying to go back and reevaluate these cases.
Especially when we have systems like a cloud system that can preserve all these documents. Why are you getting rid of this stuff? When people have lifelong.
Yeah, it's very scary. But the point that the investigation is closed, right? There's no reason that you shouldn't have it, and especially your dad. I mean, you're his representative, but you should definitely have that. So those are some things that we can work on. So what do you think in talking about that? What do you think the main things, like going back and trying to get everything? Do you feel that you've gotten everything about the case, or maybe trying to get that photograph and the fingerprints? Yeah. Like, what do you think right now is going to prove it? Like, what do you think you want to try to do, or that's something that we could do in like a bullpen session? What I call those is like brainstorming sessions. Like
yeah, I've listened to one of these sessions. I love them. I'm totally enthralled when I'm listening to you go back and forth. I think the biggest thing right now is the fingerprints. If the fingerprints in the vehicle come back to someone that she doesn't know, because the victim is still alive.
I'm getting goosebumps. I'm sorry, I'm getting goosebumps because I just can't. I don't even know what to call. Like, that does not sit right with me. That just yeah.
And another thing that just occurred to me, right? All the hurdles. For some reason, I think when you become a police officer, you just automatically, for some reason, you think guilt before you think innocent. At least that was how it was for me, because I was making so many arrests on the street. When I would approach something, it would be from a guilty standpoint. Can you prove to me that it's innocent? So when I read the report and I seen that one of the witnesses identified my father, I said, man, out of all the people in the world, how could this person identify my father, right? 5 other people, including the people that was with him, said it wasn't him. And I thought about it. And I was talking to my father one day about the interrogation. And he said, at the end of the interrogation, I said, well, what happened after that? And he said, they had me take a picture. And they, put the jumpsuit on me and put the hood on me and took a picture. And I said, what'd you say? And he said, they told me to take a picture. And I said, no, you said something about a jumpsuit and a hood. And he said, yeah, the jumpsuits, they have the gel jumpsuits, they have a hood on it. And I said, they put a hood on you and took a picture? He said, yeah. He said, yeah. He said, they put a hood over top of my head and had me take a picture. And then I'm thinking back, and I go back and I read the beginning. When the guy initially approached the woman, he had a hood over his head. So my father was saying, even in the picture that they're saying was me, the guy had a hood over his head when he went to grab the woman from behind at the ATM. So then I'm saying to myself, well, that's why the guy probably pointed you out, because that's the mugshot that they have of you, of a guy with the hood on it. So rather than just believing that, we went back to the police department and tried to request that photo. I want to see that photo, that initial photo of that my father took. Denied. You can't see the photo.
Well, and that brings out, again, because I'm working present day cases, right, with this. And one of the things I talk about is, again, back in the day, I used to create a photo lineup, and we would have black and white booking photos, and they were all kind of like, I don't know if you experienced it, but in the library card catalog, and we had the little drawers that we pulled out, and that was my job to create it. I had to sit through, I had my arrested person or my suspect's picture, and I had to physically myself, when we start talking about bias and all kinds of stuff, and facial hair and who looks like whatever, and pick people that look like the person to me. And then, that has progressed to now we have systems in place for that randomize it and supposedly do things like that. So, in the first op, but then I'm thinking, when you're saying that, because it's gotten so technical now about shirt color and facial hair, and lighting, and did you do black and white and
placement of the picture.
I'm thinking well, if it was a jacket hood, I'm thinking you're talking about some kind of spit hood or some type of hazmat type, in the jail. Well, did he have, what other hoods did the other people have? I mean, I hope to God they had hoods and did not have a hood, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's a glaring.
And if that's the case, then that would make sense. If everybody in the photo lineup had a hood on, then okay, I could kind of, I don't know. Is that legal? Is that legal to put a hood on someone? That's my question to you. I don't know. I've never been a detective before, but can you put a hood on a person for a mugshot?
Well, I'm not the lawyer, right? So, but I got to throw my disclaimer in there, so for a legal opinion, but I can tell you with my training, and the reason behind it is that the people need to look similar. You cannot have people that stand out. Okay. And one of the things I'm going to lose it. We were talking about that is, aside from that, so let's say everybody looks the same, right? They look good and the pictures are as random as possible, but as close as possible. You also have, now there's a thing where they call double blind, that they don't have the officer that's working the case go in, right? They have two separate random people, so they don't know what the answer or the right person is, because like when people are playing poker, you get poker tells, or I mean, it has, because of issues, we've gotten to that point where there's best practices to utilize. Some people don't use them, but specifically for that reason, because you don't know what somebody could say, and then even too, unfortunately, when they don't document these things, they'll take a, well, I'm not sure, and the hemming and hawing, and then they'll be like, he said yes, he identified him. But when you look at the actual words, like even sometimes when you read the police report and you read what it says, and then you go back and you listen to the audio and you watch the video, you're like, oh wow, that's totally different to get to the yes, right? So kind of what you're talking about in the interrogation of your father, what kind of a roundabout thing did they get to, intentionally or unintentionally, to get to the yes or whatever, that's then paraphrased in the report. So, well, it sounds really really interesting, and gosh, I mean, just hearing about the fingerprints and all that stuff, very, very excited. I think it's going to be very interesting, and we're looking forward to really helping you and your dad. And I don't know, anything that you want to say to anybody right now that might be listening, or I don't know. I hesitate to say exciting, because I don't think something horrific, right? I shouldn't say exciting, but to have the opportunity to help and looking at all these things, it makes me feel good, right? And
I think the biggest, I was gonna say, I think the biggest thing is if anybody out there knows a way to get the fingerprints tested, or knows a specific way to figure out where the fingerprints are, they're in the database or not, I think that would be beneficial. I mean, not only those fingerprints, right? I know you didn't want to dive. I don't know if you want me to talk about the other suspect or not, but there's a lot more to go along with this case.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely look at that, in the bullpen, and part of kind of going back to square one, and what I like to do, and that's why we have everybody with our virtual investigators. They can participate, but you really have to start over, and you have to investigate the crime and say what happened, right? And not get caught up in any type of tunnel vision, or even in this case, because we don't want it to be your dad, right? We don't want to exclude anything, and we just want to look at it and say, who are all the possible suspects, and what wasn't done, and get to it, so we can make sure that we've looked at everything, right? And that we've looked at all options. So definitely we'll get started on that. But
and also, like you said earlier, I don't want to forget about it, but I wrote a book on it.
I was just gonna say, tell me about your book, because I think that's so interesting. what life must have been like, and just your perspective. I've started reading a little bit of it, and like you said, it's just it is a completely different perspective, right? And that to come full circle to hear. So yeah, so tell everybody about your book and how they can get it. And
Sure. So the book, it's called Fatherless Son, How the Criminal Justice System Tore My Family Apart and Brought Us Back Together. And you've heard a little bit, a little snapshot about what the book is like. It's about my life growing up without a father, and then coming to the realization at this point that my father might have been wrongfully convicted. And I wrote this book for one specific reason. I've always tried to look at my ancestors, my grandmother and my great grandfather, and try to look all these people up, but I could never find any writings on them. I could never find what they wrote down, how they thought politically, what was going on during the times that they were alive. So I wanted to leave a footprint right down about how my great grandkids can know how their great grandfather thought. And so I wanted to put it on paper. And now it's etched in stone. It's in the library. It'll be in the Library of Congress, for as long as America is here. And the book is not necessarily about selling a lot of copies. I always tell people, if you don't have any money, if you don't have a dime to your name, I still want you to read this book. And you can email me at it's Arthur Rashod, AuthorRashod.com, or ArthurRashod@gmail.com. You can send me an email and I'll send you the book for free. But you can also, if you want to purchase the book, you don't have to. You can purchase it at AuthorRashod.com or on Amazon, and it's also available in audio format on audiobook.com and
wonderful.
iTunes.
I think that's great, and we'll put it on the website too. And I was just thinking something as you're talking about it, not only about a history for your family, but and we talked about a little bit before coming on today, just such the, I don't know if it's the dichotomy about the way the police relations are, and that here you're involved in doing a good job doing that, but also bucking the system, so to speak. I guess you're making a difference against the system, and work and showing how that system can work hard, right? You're working hard to right a wrong. And I think that's just that's an incredible example, not only for your family, but just for the profession too, because of late it can be so maligned. And the fact that I think it's a great testament that you could grow up the way you did and not be harmed by it. I don't know what the
exactly. So some of what I try to talk about is I kind of tote the line between a police perspective and the inner city person's perspective that's growing up in an impoverished neighborhood. Like we talked offline, I've been searched and stopped by so many cops I can't even remember before I became a police officer. And then I can remember there was a call we had of a shooting, and me and my partner, fly down there, and we turn the corner. The person had a African-American male, white shirt and blue jeans. And we get down there and we turn the corner right where the shooting happened. And what do you see but 10 or 15 African-Americans, blue shirt and white jeans. And it just clicked in my head. Oh my gosh. I look exactly like everybody else out there, which is why these cops are, those cops were stopping me at the time. It doesn't make it right, but it kind of brought some perspective into, I don't know who's who. And one of the older officers, he said, you got to get out of that vehicle and start talking to people in order to know who the troublemakers are in the neighborhood. Because the troublemakers don't want anything to do with you, but it's a bunch of people out here. 99% of the people out here want to do the right thing. They love you out here, but it's a small percentage, and you have to know who that small percentage is that's causing havoc for this neighborhood.
And be able to make a difference. I think that's so awesome. And I have to, again, praise you for doing it, continuing to do it today, because I don't know if I started today, if I'd be able to do it given the climate. And especially what you're doing for your dad. And I appreciate you reaching out to us. And we'll go ahead and end it here, and you can find out more. We'll put the link to get the book on the website, helpsolvethecase.com. Or if you want to be a virtual investigator, you could go to patreon.com/helpsolvethecase, patreon.com/helpsolvethecase, and become a virtual investigator. And we'll start comparing fingerprints and looking at some DNA and maybe doing some FOIA requests and see if we can get that picture for you. So I really appreciate it, and we look forward to getting some justice for you and your dad and your family, right? And also, we can't forget when this sort of stuff happens, like you mentioned in the very beginning, there's the victim's family.
Yes.
Got no justice, which people tend to think about the person that's lost all the years of their lives being incarcerated, but it's a second injustice for the family where the real person never got convicted. So we need to be cognizant of that too. So we're getting justice for two people, and righting a wrong in that. So we look forward to it. And thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you so much. I look forward to working with you guys.
Thank you. Well, that ends another episode of the Help Solve the Case podcast. If you would like to join us as a virtual investigator and work on this case or any of our other cases, please join us as a virtual investigator. You can even become a cold case specialist and have your own case and your own podcast. Check out the details at patreon.com/help solve the case. You can also, if you are a family member, friend, or loved one, reach out to us via our website at helpsolvethecase.com to submit your case for consideration for our investigators and virtual investigators to work. Once again, we thank you and we appreciate your support, and thank you for helping us help solve the case.